There's so much evidence out there that's demonstrating now that if we sleep better, we manage glucose better. If we sleep better, we can manage all kinds of what we eat better. We always think that, well, sleep doesn't matter, it's this little thing. Well, what about fasting improving sleep so that you can have more flexibility with your diet? I personally believe that if we sleep better, we have more flexibility in terms of what we can eat without as much negative impact, which goes right in line with fasting, right? It's kind of nice. You abstain from food for periods of time and perhaps get yourself a little bit more flexibility when you do eat. So how do we get the best of both worlds? Fasting so that we can improve sleep potentially, and also fasting so that we can maybe have a little bit more flexibility with our diet. Well, we have to look at some stuff called early time restricted feeding, which is getting more and more popular, and I've been quite obsessed with it recently. Okay, early time restricted feeding is where occasionally you are skipping dinner instead of skipping breakfast. Now, there's some good reason behind this, and if we looked at the data, it's quite clear. Okay, there were some studies that were published back in the journal Nature a while back, and these studies demonstrated that we have more ability to process fuels in the morning time than we do in the evening time, particularly when it comes down to fats. So we can get away with consuming more calorically dense foods like fats, like eggs and oil and bacon and avocado and all that stuff in the morning than we can having higher fat foods in the evening. Okay, and that's simply because of what is called the diurnal or environmental cue oscillation of insulin sensitivity. Basically, we just have differences in when we can metabolize fuels based on what time of day it is. But what does that have to do with sleep? Well, we can actually influence our circadian clock genes by when we fast, not just by fasting in general. You see, by telling someone to fast to fix their sleep is like telling someone to eat 2,000 calories when you don't know how many calories they're actually burning, right? It doesn't matter. If that person isn't burning calories, then telling them how much to eat isn't gonna matter, right? We don't have to know. So seeing someone to just like fast isn't gonna magically fix your sleep. So when you look at a study that was published in the journal Nutrients, it gets pretty interesting. This study demonstrated that when subjects ate between the hours of 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. in an early time-restricted feeding fashion, it expressed genes that were associated with our circadian clock. So it expressed what are called clock genes, things like BMAL1, things like PER1, all these things that are associated with the circadian clock. So in other words, when they fasted during this period of time, it was natural. Oh, we're eating during the day. We're eating in the morning, so upregulate genes that are associated with being awake. And then we start winding down the food after 2 p.m. in this particular case. So genes that were associated with being awake and eating started to go down, and consequently, genes that were associated with sleep and winding down started to increase, having a cascading effect, increasing melatonin levels and all this stuff that allows us to sleep. Upregulating these clock genes is super, super, super important. Now, I will say losing weight is going to be beneficial for your sleep, and there's plenty of stuff to document that. Fasting in general might improve your sleep, okay? Improving glucose tolerance, yeah, that could improve your sleep. But if we're actually looking for the diurnal rhythm benefit, we do have to look at this. And we go back to that study that was published in Nature, that demonstrated that when we eat later in the day, we do disrupt those circadian cues. And I've talked about this, so I sound like a broken record, but when it's dark out, our body is being bombarded with cues to say wind down. And when we eat, we are bombarding our body with a cue that says wake up, because we really shouldn't be eating like when the sun is going down as much. That just goes against the grain of these diurnal cues. Now, one of the things that I suggest for people that are really having a hard time, there's a company called Bowmar Nutrition that came out with a really cool sleep product. I really recommend that for people that are just trying to break through and get a little bit better sleep, because I've suffered with sleep quite a bit ever since my son was born. So this product is cool because it uses a small amount of melatonin, just enough to kind of kickstart, okay? But it also uses magnesium glycinate, which is a form of magnesium that has glycine in it that can help influence sleep, because the glycine has a cooling effect in the extremities, which makes it so that you end up having vasodilation that can affect sleep and kind of get you to calm down. The glycine-bound magnesium plays a powerful role when it comes down to potential gamma-aminobutyric acid function and how this GABA is skewed in our brain. Not to mention, this Bowmar sleep product also has GABA in it. It has a GABA-aminobutyric acid. If you've ever taken GABA, it's a little bit subjective, but you kind of feel calm. I don't want to say you feel sedated, that's the wrong word. You kind of feel like you've been hanging out with friends for a while and you feel good, and you feel relaxed, and you just don't feel high strung. That's what I really, really like about it. So a really cool combination of things in there, not to mention some things like lemon balm that just almost instantly help you feel calm. So I put a link down below to check them out. You don't have to do it, but it's something that could work during a fast. You could go ahead and add it in, like if you're doing eTRF, and you could have it maybe even warm, add it to some water, warm water, sip on it almost like a tea, and that might help you sleep a little bit, or at least restore some patterns. Okay, so now we have to move into the rest of the research here. There's another benefit that comes with this whole thing. Okay, when we sleep, there are studies that demonstrate that our glucose tolerance improves. So we could be walking ourselves down this nice path to actually repaving a lot of our metabolic issues simply by restoring sleep. So rather than saying fasting is going to fix your metabolic issues, I would rather back up and say use fasting as a circadian cue to help you sleep better, to ultimately have more restoration to your metabolism. Because the research is fairly clear when you look at how sleep impacts postprandial glucose, like it impacts how you respond to carbohydrates in terms of glucose. Do you spike way up, or do you actually stay nice and controlled? Okay. There are studies that even demonstrate that just one night of bad sleep can negatively impact insulin resistance temporarily. There are studies that demonstrate that a few nights of poor sleep can really have an impact. 2 weeks of poor sleep really has an impact, but there's also studies that demonstrate that when you just add 60 minutes more to your sleep, if you're sleeping less than 6 hours, that alone can markedly improve postprandial glucose and markedly improve HOMA-IR, so basically your lagging indicator for insulin resistance. So sleep is what we should be focusing on, and if fasting can be a crutch to help us get better sleep, then who knows, maybe we don't have to fast if you don't want to later on. I still would recommend that you do. Now here's something interesting to think too. If breathing during sleep is an issue, now here's what's wild. I carry a fair bit of muscle. I'm about 180, 185 pounds. I'm not as big as I look on TV or on your screen, but the fact is, having muscle makes it so that if I'm not breathing really clear, or I have any hint of any kind of asthma or anything like that, or allergies, I don't sleep as well. Interesting study that was published in the journal Medicina that took a look at when subjects are fasting and producing ketones, like they're fasting long enough to produce ketones, it actually improved sleep and reduced symptoms of sleep apnea, probably because it was influencing the NLRP3 inflammasome, having an effect on inflammation. So sleep apnea is not always just restrictive because of weight. We think, okay, sleep apnea, big, heavy person, restriction on their lungs, can't breathe as well. That definitely plays a role, but there's also a potential asthmatic role, a potential inflammatory role that goes above and beyond. I've known plenty of 150, 160 pound people that still suffer with sleep apnea. Now, I'm not a doctor, but I will take a look at the evidence. And if ketones are higher, ketones do seem to be potentially anti-inflammatory. The problem is, if you're fasting through the morning and eating at night, the anti-inflammatory effect of the fast has come and gone. If you skip dinner, you allow the anti-inflammatory effect of the fast, i.e. being deeper in it and the ketones being higher, to be there while you're sleeping. So try skipping dinner, and the first couple of nights you might not sleep as well because it's an adjustment and your body's hungry and you're kind of weirded out by it. But as you get used to it a little bit more and do it 2 or 3 times per week, don't do it all the time, your family will hate you, okay, but 2 or 3 times a week, then you start noticing, I'm sleeping better because you have the potential anti-inflammatory effect of ketones being present. So as always, keep it locked in here on my channel. Don't forget to check out my friends with Bowmar Nutrition down below in the description, and I'll see you tomorrow.